Welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the break. It's time to dive into our next session, which features stories of progress of food service in restaurants collaborating with policymakers to enact change on menus and in operations. This session will be in two parts. They will flow from one to the next. The first part of the session is a panel, Policymakers Reshaping Menus in Collaboration with Food Service, featuring case studies from New York City. And then the second part of the panel will be a presentation from Ann McBride of James Beard Foundation. So the first panel is going to be moderated by Tariq Sharif, the Business and Development Strategy Manager working with the government of the District of Columbia. Tariq works in the Deputy Mayor's office in DC, creating and implementing programs and strategies that address inequitable food access, and he was previously involved in shaping policy and international agreements with the Food Policy Director. Tariq is a former chef and was an operational manager at the DC Central Kitchen. He's also a dear friend of mine. Please join me in welcoming Tariq and the panelists to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Abby, for the wonderful introduction. As she said, my name is Tariq Sharif, and I work in the mayor's office in Washington, D.C., where I lead the city's strategy and programming to enhance our food ecosystem. As Abby mentioned, prior to this role, I was working as a food policy advisor to the D.C. Food Policy Director to work and increase our efforts on food access, security and food systems resilience, and sustainability across the city, much like our panelists will be doing here, who I'll introduce in a second. I'm also a recovering chef, as Abby mentioned, but I went to that other school up in Rhode Island, so we won't talk about that here. That's why I don't get invited here very often. But today I'm excited to talk about, host this panel and talk about and highlight the amazing work that's happening at the city level to use policy to reshape menus in collaboration with and to support food service. Before we get into that, and I introduce our panelists, I want to give you a little primer on the work we're doing in DC, because I have to. And so food policy, while it's a long-established field, is still small and growing at the local policy level. It's only existed as an official position in DC for the last 10 years or so. A little bit longer in New York and some other places. And we've made some huge strides in that time, doing everything from defining what local food is in our legislation and code, to enhancing reimbursements for school meals, supporting local and regional growers, adopting values-based procurement metrics, funding public-private partnerships to support food businesses with technical assistance and access to capital, cataloging and reducing our carbon footprint from food procurements, and the one I'm most proud of is deploying over $60 million to local food businesses. And even with all of that, we're just scratching the surface of how much we can do and use policy as a lever to make systemic change in the food system. So let's shift a little bit here, and let's dig into that work that's being done in New York, which I will say is a little further ahead in the procurement space than it is in DC. And I want to talk to our panelists and introduce them who are exemplifying this work in New York City as conscious culinary leaders. So first we have Neeti Jain, who is an environmental scientist and justice practitioner who serves as the Strategic Partnerships Advisor for the New York City's Mayor's Office of Food Policy. That's a mouthful, always in government. Where she leads efforts to reduce carbon emissions from food procurement for the city in both public and private sectors. She is dedicated to creating a healthier and more resilient food system for New Yorkers. We also have Nelson Quiles. I think I got it right. He just told me and I don't want to mess it up. He is a 2006 CIA grad. Amazing, welcome back. And has spent his career with New York City Public Schools in the Office of Food and Nutrition Services, and now serves as Senior Director of Policy, Partnerships, and Communication. And in this role, he is working to shape policies, programming, and enhance partnerships to ensure all New York City students receive safe, nutritious, and fulfilling meals every day. We also have Philip DeMaiolo, who's a corporate chef and senior manager of culinary development for Sodexo at Health and Hospitals New York City, which is one of the largest healthcare systems in the country. He has over 25 years of kitchen experience and worked his way up through the ranks, holding numerous executive chef positions, competing in culinary competitions, and serving in leadership roles for various culinary organizations, including the American Culinary Federation. And finally, we have Mary McCarthy, who is the Vice President of Sustainability at Levy Restaurants, where she works across the sports, entertainment, convention center, cultural attraction, and restaurant portfolios, which is pretty much everything they do, to reduce food waste and design menus targeted at solving today's and tomorrow's environmental challenges. And she is very passionate about bringing back biodiversity to the food system. So thank you all for being here and talking about the amazing work that New York is doing. So to start out, I will kick it to Neeti. It's great to have you here. And I'd love to hear about the work you're doing in public policy at the nexus of climate change and food, and tell us about the ecosystem you're building in New York.
Thank you, Tariq. So the work in New York City really kind of kicked off when we started to take a look at how food and climate intersect. And this work began in 2023 when we started with a carbon inventory. And so if we are able to go to that slide, that would be awesome. So we really just looked at how is food contributing to New York City's overall carbon footprint. And we found doing a consumption-based inventory where we just look at what people are buying and how their activities are contributing to the footprint, that food was the third largest contributor to New York City's overall greenhouse gas emissions. And that was such a moment of kind of recognition of like, this is not only a really big climate issue, but can also be a climate solution. So that's when New York City committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from food by 33% by 2030. And then we also just looked at what we're buying. So the charts behind me show that, you know, a very, very small percentage of the food that we were buying in the ruminant meat category, which is in red, contributes to over 40, so 3% of what we're buying contributes to over 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions footprint, and other animal-based foods as well have just a significant impact on our greenhouse gas emissions. And so we also wanted to think about what we're putting on our plate as a city that is an enormous food buyer. We spend over $500 million a year purchasing food. We're, you know, essentially one of the other large restaurants, you could call it, in the country. And we have a lot of ability to use those dollars to align with the values that we really care about. So that's when we started launching some of our ambitious plant forward initiatives. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide here. In order to meet this commitment for a 33% reduction by 2030, we thought about how we can change what we put on the plate across both the public and the private sector. So first we introduced, or kind of aligned with a program that Chef Phil will talk about at Health and Hospitals to really think about food as a source of medicine and health for our residents, and how we can use more plant-forward eating in the hospital system to both think about public health and planetary health. Then in the public schools, thinking about food education and how we talk to our K through 12 students about our food system, where their food is coming from, and what it does for them when it goes into their bodies, and then when they throw it away, and how it goes into either landfill or compost. And then finally, to engage the private sector and really think about all of the places that food is served across New York City, not just at the agencies, and how we can utilize the best and the brightest of the private sector to also take really ambitious steps towards working on food and climate. Mm-hmm. And we at the Mayor's Office of Food Policy have the honor of kind of uplifting all of the work that our practitioners do. We're kind of the connective tissue, so really excited to turn it over to the other folks to talk about the work that they're doing.
Great, thank you for that. And we'll come back to you in a minute because we're going to dig into some more of those topics. So we've talked about the work major cities are doing to move kind of food and climate agendas forward, which is through the policy lever. And there's two ways we do that: big P policy, legislation, laws, changes in that way, and then little p policy. And this is the way I describe it to people to make it a little easier for them, which is internal changes, champions, things going on in agencies, internal work that's done that's not codified, but is still making that operational change to make that shift, which hopefully we can then codify in law based on the work that's been done to move things forward. And so let's shift to that operation side of things and see how people are actually doing this work and leading that change. And I'd like to talk about panelists. So we'll start with you, Nelson, and kind of how you move the needle in sustainability, food, and climate within your areas. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about Plant Forward Fridays, which is a really cool program that you're working on.
Thank you for that. So yeah, I think the first thing we had to realize is our size and the impact that we could have. As an organization that feeds 900,000 meals a day at over 1,800 sites, we realized that one minor decision could have a pretty large impact on a daily basis, and understanding that there would be a ripple effect that would be caused that would that would really impact just beyond that school cafeteria. So I think having our team understand that we have a very unique opportunity to create a significant impact on a daily basis has been very important. And I think we've really kind of focused on 3 pillars. The first was having sustainable procurement practices, really focusing on local and regional products and trying to source things that are relatively close to us. That was number 1. And then on top of that, just being very mindful of future procurement and really trying to find climate-friendly foods and incorporating those onto our menu. Secondly was waste reduction and efficiency. So we've had great success with programs like our share tables, composting. We've also made some innovations to our forecasting tools that our staff use to reduce or minimize overproduction. And then I think lastly, probably the most impactful has been menu innovations. So we've introduced plant-powered recipes. A real big thing for us, which was huge for our organization, was back in 2022, we introduced back then something called Vegan Fridays. It was Vegan Friday for one Friday. And through this process, we also learned engaging with the community and working with transparency and really providing the why behind systematic decisions was incredibly crucial to getting buy-in and ultimate understanding of any type of big change. So after that first Friday, we quickly shifted to plant-powered Fridays, where we offered a center-of-the-plate vegan menu item, but it was also accompanied with other vegetarian or plant-based recipes surrounding it. And that was big, because I think folks appreciated that we weren't telling them that they had to eat something, but we were making it an available option and allowing them to choose. So that was really, really big for our team, and this is our 3rd year doing it, and through constant, I would say, community engagement, student surveys, student taste testings, and really taking the time to educate families, administration, and students on why we're making these decisions and making these options available has really allowed the community to understand the reason behind something, understand that it's an option, and it's available there if they want it, in addition with many other options. So all of our menus are student taste tested. They must get a 70% approval rating from the students themselves before they are incorporated onto the citywide menu. And that's been huge for us, because we take great pride in saying our menus are created for students, but also approved and student-driven. So that's just been really good for us, very promising. So those are pretty much our 3 main pillars on what we focused on, how we can impact New York City and beyond, and while educating the future and having students understand their impact and their food choices moving forward.
Fantastic. Some common themes we're hearing from that first panel into here, so we'll pick up on those in a little bit. Philip, same to you. What are you doing to move the needle in sustainability, food, and climate within your work?
Well, it's very similar what Nelson was just stating. We just took a little different approach at Health and Hospitals, being the largest public medical facilities throughout the United States. When we started our plant-based journey, we took a deep dive into the community. We wanted to make sure that they felt comfort in the food that they were going to receive. And we service all the underserved in New York City. So therefore, these are individuals that are not going to a restaurant once or twice a week. They're mostly cooking at home. So we also wanted to make sure that we gathered ingredients that when they left our hospitals, they can actually prepare these meals at home. And we actually give them literature on that as well. So we went and we did a deep dive, and we did a deep dive through all 5 boroughs that we service. We have a large population of Latinos, so we really focused on Caribbean food, Latino food, and then obviously in Queens, where they speak 185 languages, we had to be a little diverse. But we came up with ingredients, and we really acted within our staff by inclusiveness. So including the staff, they're the ones that live in the communities. So they're the ones that can actually help us, support the communities. So inclusiveness and building confidence in them in order to prepare these meals. And we tied everyone in from nursing to the people who clean the rooms and the doctors about why we wanted to go on this journey. And we went on a road trip with the entire team and just educated everyone involved. We also, like your students taste the menu before it goes out, we do specials just like you would do in a restaurant. And we have individuals that go up there and actually they're called Foodservice associates, and they take your choice for the day. And you have a first choice of plant-based, you have a second choice of plant-based, and then it'll go on to other types of protein. But they're not called plant-based and they're not called vegan. Those are dirty names. We call them the chef's special of the day, and this is why you should try the chef's special of the day. So nothing goes on our menu unless we get an 80% or better to make our menu. And the only reason why our clients already graduated, so we're at a higher level. So that's where we've been successful. And we have a great support system at Sodexo. I mean, everyone works together. It's never they work for me, it's we work together, okay? And that's just the way we approach the whole operation.
That's fantastic. I love that. And a little 80% competition. Although I will say 70 is still a high bar for schools because I have an almost 2-year-old and she is the pickiest eater I know in the world. Unreal. So Mary, over to you. And I'm failing to move these slides forward, so I do apologize. These are some of the,
Yeah,
if
if
you
I
want to talk
could
about
just
these
mention,
before I jump to you, Mary, sorry.
diving into the communities and looking at what we're serving, we cook from scratch at the Culinary Center. So everything that you see there, whether you're in Queens and you're eating a red curry vegetable with roasted tofu, or you're up in the Bronx and you're eating penne pasta with a pea pesto and fresh roasted tomatoes. So and our sancocho and arroz con gandules are really popular in our communities where most of our Latinos live.
Yeah.
So that's basically how, and then the trajectory of where we started in early 2022.
Well, actually, I'm going to stop you there. We'll hold off on this one. We'll come back to that
Okay.
in a little bit for some follow-up. I'm going to take away my own slides here and my own conversations. Mary, to you, give us a rundown on how you're moving the needle in this space.
Sure. So Levy, if you're not familiar, we're a part of Compass Group. We have a net zero commitment through that, but we do sports and entertainment hospitality, and that means that we serve a lot of hot dogs and hamburgers, and we have to deal with that as part of our net zero commitment. And the opportunity to work on the challenge here in New York City gave us an opportunity to really experiment with how we take that holistic approach to try and think of sports and entertainment as an opportunity area, right? The potential there is huge, I think, for the broader cultural shift around meat. And so the US Open is a kind of iconic event. Levy has been operating it in partnership with Restaurant Associates for over 2 decades. And what I love about it is it gives us an opportunity to kind of help us bridge the gap on that cultural piece, right? The US Open has a very international audience. It's based here in New York. And so it already has a very diverse menu. So the opportunity to kind of experiment and really use that as the leader for us in terms of how we continue to develop our plant-forward strategy was super exciting. And the US Tennis Association has been working on sustainability for over a decade now as well. So they were excited to do it. The flip side of the potential of that is it's a challenging event. They beat the 1 million attendee mark over 3 weeks for the first time last year. It's very diverse operations. So you'll see there, in the course of 3 weeks, we serve 7 restaurants, everything from fine dining to casual, concession stands, suites, dining for athletes. And so really trying to figure out how we deliver this change that we're looking for in a 3-week period, take a year to revisit our strategies and do it again to make that incremental progress is a challenge. So we treated last year as the baseline to kind of figure out where we're at. And this year we're really excited to be continuing to make those changes on menu. We're focusing this year really on just like how we design the menus, more vegetarian and vegan options, but also just that holistic approach. So how we make plant-based the default, and then we add an option for animal protein. And I'm really also excited we're going to be piloting some blended burgers, a mushroom beef blend this year. And so for us, this just means we can learn and have this immediate impact here at this event at a large scale, but then also take that back to our 250 locations around the country where maybe the conditions aren't quite as warm for making these changes.
Fantastic. So Neeti, coming back to you real quick, there's a lot of congruency that we're seeing here in the public-private realms, and you talked a lot about this work pushing forward policy that helps enable these things to happen. So how, if at all, has this kind of impacted the food policy work in New York City as these groups and schools, hospitals, venues are making these changes already? Are there any supporting services or barriers to change at the policy level that exist? And then how can other cities and jurisdictions create the same ecosystem that you developed in New York?
It's really like this public-private partnership model is so successful primarily because we can learn from each other. And I think that's where like the success of, following values-based procurement on the public side is something that we can take to our private sector partners and say, here's how to align your purchasing and your dollars with the values that we really care about. And then when we partner with the private sector through programs like the Plant-Powered Carbon Challenge, we get to take learnings from them, particularly on things like how can you really use some of the good like behavioral nudges and defaults and restaurant quality meals and helping diners make good and sustainable green choices and bring that all back into our agencies. And so the Plant-Powered Carbon Challenge, for example, has signatories in a bunch of different sectors. Of course, we have the US Open. There are a couple other folks in the audience that are actually members. We have Morrison Healthcare. I know Lisa's out here. I know Katan and Cecil from NYU is here. Like, we have a lot of folks in sectors that have very different diner audiences that come into the food eating space with very different expectations. And so getting to kind of take in that information and use it when we think about food policy in New York City and how we can better serve our agencies is just a really cool learning model. And then something that I've seen is together both public and private sector are demanding better tools to do this work and really to track our impact. So, to ease the data burden a little bit and be able to look at what we're buying and how that impacts our food, we're seeing calls for better software, better like technology that will make it super easy so that it doesn't have to be this thing that you embark on with like tons and tons of money and tons of time, but rather something that other cities can take on even if they're not a super well-resourced food policy office, but is something that becomes kind of part and parcel of a food plan or a climate plan.
Fantastic. Absolutely love that. So let's dig into the data. We talked about operations, how you're doing it, and there's questions coming in, which I think we'll probably go through and answer some things on here. But let's talk a little bit about the data, kind of the work you're doing and the pilots and how those things are changing where we're moving to. So let's start with you, Mary, this time. Let's talk about some of the pilot work you've done for the US Open. Which is one of my favorite events to attend, by the way. I used to go religiously every year, not so much as I've gotten older. But what is the value you see in these pilots for Levy and how that's going to shape kind of the approach to sports entertainment across your brands and across the globe?
Yeah, it's a great question. I see it as a bridge event for us. We do everything from NASCAR to NFL to the Kentucky Derby, and each of those have very different guests, right? And very, very different guest expectations coming in. I think the other challenge for us is oftentimes we're someone's splurge moment, right? So when I think about my own dietary behavior, right, what the lunches that I make for myself, the dinners I make at home are different, and then when I'm splurging, I approach that differently. That said, we still have a real responsibility and I think a real opportunity to link that splurge moment with more sustainable options, right? We can't just sort of settle with putting a big steak on the plate because that's easy and what people expect. And so for us, doing something like at the US Open, we're doing a couple of innovative pilots in NBA and NHL arenas as well. I think that helps us then learn how we really meet those guest expectations. Interestingly, the concern is rarely about financials. It's always about, is the guest going to be happy, right? Are they going to enjoy the food that they're receiving? And so it's just a good way for us to pilot in what we see, and particularly with a partner like the U.S. Tennis Association that sees the value in this, to really figure out how we exceed those guest expectations and then bring that back where the conditions might not be quite as supportive, but we know we need to make changes anyway.
Great. Phil, let's go back and dig into those metrics a little bit that you wanted to talk about. And let's learn a bit more about how you're measuring success with data.
Absolutely. Well, there's a couple of ways that we measure success. Number one, our carbon footprint is measured by a lot of it. We have people who just study that all day long. And I think the first year that we did it, we actually reduced it by 36%. And that was mostly through our purchases. It also basically helps us when we do something like that, where we look for ingredients that the people that we buy them from, the purveyors, they also have a product that's sustainable. We use one product that we have that usually shiitake mushroom stems are thrown away. We have a product that we utilize that, so it's total utilization of product as well. The other way that we measured it, obviously, we counted the meals that we served over the first year. In the first year, we hit a little over 850,000. We've gone well over the a million or two in the past. We're into our third year as a plant-based. And we have a platform called Experiencia also that we use, which is real-time data that we get. And that's by us rounding with our patients and making sure that they're satisfied with their meal. It's the best way to find out. I mean, it's just like going to a dining room table when you're in a private restaurant and asking them how they like it. So those are the ways that we're actually looking at it. And in our metrics that we've seen, that we've gotten over a 90 to 95% acceptance rate of the food that we're serving. And I think that's because of our deep dive into the community. And you know, when people are ill, what do they want? They want comfort food from their childhood, right? So that's what we prepare for them. And that's pretty much how we've, you know, like I said, if anything is less than 80% when we first started a special, we look at reviving it or fixing it somehow or just not serving it at all. So it has to be popular with the people that we serve.
That's fantastic. I mean, and I think it's really important to note that all three of these, well, four, but these three operators here, operate in what I think we probably describe as captive audiences, right? They're in that space, they're gonna eat the food. And even with that, they're still ensuring that hospitality first mentality and making sure that everyone is taken care of and treated like family, and the food is good and valued, and the patients, the students, the guests, the spectators all get what they want and what they need from the food, which is so critical to making this successful. So just want to call that out because I keep talking about that, and I want to, you know, let's clap for that because that is fantastic. So, Nelson, moving back to you a little bit, what are the tools that you use to evaluate kind of the climate sustainability impact of the work you're doing? I know in 2022 you partnered with the Humane Society, which is now called the Humane World for Animals, to look at the carbon footprint reduction from the plant-powered Fridays that you were mentioning. Can you talk a little more about that data and how that has shaped your thinking on other program changes that you want to make?
Yeah, so we implemented Plant Power Fridays in 2022, and through our work with the Humane Society, or Humane World for Animals, they put us in contact with a sustainability consultant based out of Seattle by the name of WPS. And we opened up all of our records to them, allowing them to compare our food purchases from 2022, once we implemented Plant-Powered Fridays, versus 2018, prior to not having many plant-forward recipes on the menu. And it took them about 1.5 to 2 years to complete the study, but we found that there was very promising results. And I'm gonna read the results because I wanna make sure I do justice to the proper numbers and data that was shared. But once they compared our records from 2018 to 2022, we found that plant-forward menu changes cut the carbon water footprint from animal products by 40% and the land footprint by over 50%. So to put it in a little bit more perspective, per student, this meant saving 30 pounds of carbon, 300 gallons of water, and 300 square feet of land. And WPS did such a great job of giving us like equivalents to this to really present to the community so that folks could really visualize what those numbers mean. So the proper equivalents to that would be recycling 640,000 bags of trash, providing drinking water to 3.5 million people, and lastly, freeing up enough land to be able to feed 14,000 people for a year. So we knew the impact of plant-powered recipes incorporated into our menu because of our scope would have a significant impact, but we never thought that it would lead to 42% reduction in carbon emissions per student. So I think those numbers are staggering, and it's be foolish of us not to continue this trend and think beyond the Friday. Now we're thinking about how do we incorporate plant-based options throughout the regular week, normalizing it, and not even calling it out anymore. I think we see our future as there's a plant-powered option available every single day, and there is no longer a plant-powered Friday. We really want to normalize this for our communities. We want to normalize it so that it's not something folks think about it. It's an option that's there, it's available to them, and there's really not much thought that goes into it anymore. So I think we're on that trend, and we're very excited for the opportunities that that's going to bring for us.
Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit more about what challenges that you face kind of internally, externally to implement these, internal policies and changes that you're making to make a sustainable difference within the food system. What do those challenges look like? How do you overcome them? Are they supply chain related? Are they sourcing? Are they taste preferences? Is it identifying vendors? Sales mix retention, right? Pricing, these are all businesses, right? So we need to make sure that's being taken care of. So what does that look like, and is there pushback at the leadership level? So whoever wants to jump in on there first.
I can start.
Yeah.
I think for us, the biggest challenge is the expectation a fan is coming into, bringing into the venues that we operate. It is a cultural icon of America to have a hot dog at a baseball game, right? And so we want to maintain that incredible experience and change it, right? And that's a tension. And I think from the leadership level, our leadership is fully supportive of making those changes, and they know that hot dogs and hamburgers sell, right? And so we have to, I feel like it's my responsibility to create the conditions where we're making these menu changes, and we're demonstrating that we're maintaining that guest experience, and we're maintaining those sales. If I don't, they get pulled off the table, right? So we still have to hold ourselves to those standards, I think, and be unwavering on that point. But the benefit of that is, and this is always my hope, is that someone walks into one of our venues, has an incredible experience, right? Hopefully the game's good, they have a great time, incredible food and beverage experience, and they are exposed to just a little bit of sustainability storytelling, right? And they walk away linking that sustainability storytelling with this strong and pervasive element of our culture, and think differently about it, right? Now, hopefully, to the earlier panel's point, it's joyful, it's fun, it's not having to give up. But we have to take on the responsibility of maintaining that quality to be able to do it.
Yeah, every day there's a challenge, obviously, but how we look at it is that, number one, we have a great support system. Everyone was for this, and we jumped in deep. We just didn't have, 2019 we had Meatless Mondays, but when we went into the plant-based journey, we went full force. So we were feeding people that were meat-centric. A lot of people from the islands that, the vegetation that they grow were mostly root vegetables. So we had to educate them as well on how good the meal could be, not only for them, for their health, but also for their taste. And that's why we also went the route of everything was scratch cooking, like Chef Ann mentioned before, because we can control the ingredients, especially the sodium. There's not a box of salt in our kitchen. All of our flavors come from the processes that we use as far as the cooking methods and fresh herbs and having the product speak for itself. I think the biggest thing is procurement, especially in our days today. It's so difficult to get, I'm not going to say quality, but ingredients that are very clean, especially when it comes into the plant-based world. So that's what we look for. We want a product that has maybe 3 to 5 ingredients that we know we can utilize that's not going to subject the individual to eating something that's not healthy for them. And so that's pretty much what we do. And it's been very successful because you can cook healthy and have everyone have everything taste better, okay, or good, or educate individuals, because we're creatures of habit, things that we grow up on. But when you're used to being meat-centric, there's a little pushback when you first start. But education is everything.
Yeah. Takes a little reprogramming and some time to make that change.
I can maybe
please.
kind of expand on that point, which is I feel like a lot of the maybe challenge, but also opportunity is like the cultural shift moment that we're having to just have a conversation around how plant-rich menuing can be such an opportunity for creativity and innovation. And this is really where I think like chefs and people who are really, really experts in creating delicious food can lead the way. They can develop recipes. They can use ingredients that we are not, used to using in diets that we consume here in the States, and create spaces of joy and excitement and interest so that people feel like making the more sustainable choice is not something that is a sacrifice, but rather something that they get to do. And have a conversation about it and get some of that sustainability storytelling, but the focus is really on delicious food. And I think this is where like assistance and expertise from a lot of the folks in this room that have that ability on how do we engineer menus to be really, really exciting? How do we create dishes that are colorful and vibrant, that speak to the cultural diversity of New York City? How do we do all of that successfully? Presents such an opportunity for us. And I think it's like getting everyone else as excited about this cultural shift is, I think, something that we definitely are thinking about in the stories that we tell.
Fantastic. We got a couple questions we're going to take from our online poll here, and then we're running low on time, so I want to make sure we have time for closing thoughts too. So one of the big ones here that's been upvoted quite a few times, comments from the panelists seem to be focused on environmental sustainability. Are there initiatives that go into other pillars like social or economic sustainability? Is there any work that any of you folks or Neeti,
I'll
you're
go
doing
really
that?
quickly,
Yeah.
and then I hope you all will speak to this as well. It's actually interesting that all of our comments have been about environmental sustainability because that's not where we came to this work at first. Like, Mayor's Office of Food Policy is very much focused on public health and like making sure that New Yorkers live healthy, long lives and have access to fresh and affordable produce. And then we also are like responsible for taxpayer dollars. So like we're also thinking about the economics of this. And I think Chef Phil will tell you that this process has saved us a ton of money in the hospital system. We've literally saved 59 cents per tray by switching to the plant-based default program. And that we've been able to really think about things like chronic disease and longevity of New Yorkers by feeding folks diets that are higher in fruits, vegetables, and plant-based proteins.
Very quickly.
Yeah, and I think as Neeti had said, when you look at it, sometimes when you're just focusing on one item, and food was obviously the major focus when we started this, things start to fall in place. And it kind of becomes an eye-opener. You say, hey, I'm using this product, okay? It's totally sustainable. It's helping us cut our carbon footprint. Now let me look for more like that. So when things start to fall in place like that, it just sparks the energy, and you just start looking at other ways of, following the procedures and the policies.
Yeah. Mary, I know you want to say something, so no, you good? Okay. We're about to run out of time here, and I want to make sure we have time for our next presenter to talk about the work that's happened at the federal level. So I'm going to change up my closing question to tie into that a little bit better. What are some state, local, or federal policies that each of you like to see kind of happen or change that would support the work you're doing now, if there are any?
Oh, doing that in 10 seconds feels hard. I think for us, what's been nice about the New York City policy is it was kind of a rallying moment, right? We already had our net zero commitment, but it created that moment for us to have a meaningful conversation with the U.S. Tennis Association to kind of be even more intentional. So I think where we can create those spaces where we're just creating that kind of sense of urgency and intentionality at the local level is going to help us when we're trying to make changes nationally.
And I just think, you know, I have the pleasure and the honor of working for a company that has their own goals. So a lot of their goals were already set even prior to some of these policies coming out. So we're ahead of the game.
Great. Nelson?
If I could just add.
Yeah?
If I could just add to that, accessibility is a big thing. So New York City has been universal free meals for all students, but recently New York State passed some legislation where all New York State public school students will receive free meals. So I think that is huge in the sense of it's an option that's available to folks now that might lead to some really healthy choices moving forward and just building some positive habits.
Great. Anything you want to add?
And I think I'll just say that, like you talked about little P policy and big P policy, this is where like other cities are doing this as well. Like we're getting really excited by cities all around the world that are like, you know what, this can happen even in places where you wouldn't expect. We're seeing like small little P policy changes related to values-based procurement and plant-forward menuing in places like Brazil and in Milan and, you know, cities where you wouldn't expect that to happen. So it feels like this is a moment for transformation.
Yeah, great. And I will say that gives, I think, Neeti and I some work to do to keep pushing these things forward, and hopefully in DC we'll see free school meals for all very soon. No promises there. I don't make the laws. Well, thank you all for an incredible panel. I know we could probably talk about this for many, many more hours, which I think we may do later. If there are more questions, I know there are, please come find all of them. And if you have some for me, I'm happy to take them as well throughout the next day and a half. I think these are some amazing leaders that are doing great work, and they are imagining, believing, and acting to exemplify and embody the work that we are all here to do. So thank you again to our panelists. No, take it down with you. All right, and now I also get the pleasure of introducing the next speaker, who is a great friend and an amazing woman, Dr. Ann McBride. She is the Vice President of Impact at the James Beard Foundation, where she oversees all of JBF's research, training, and advocacy work, including the Foundation's annual Independent Restaurant Industry Report, Climate Solutions for Restaurant Survival Campaign, Chef Bootcamp for Policy and Change, and Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Program, which is just a ton of work. Ann also holds a PhD in food studies from New York University and wrote her dissertation on the changing role of the chef in the 21st century. She is a native of Switzerland, the co-author of 7 books, and she is a member of the 2024 Aspen Institute Food Leaders Fellowship, which is a program in which we first met. I can sincerely say I want to be just like her when I grow up. I'm a little intimidated by her. And so let's welcome to the stage for a presentation on city and federal advocacy opportunities and climate change resources for restaurants and food service professionals.
Thank you so much, Tariq. It's so great to see you all here. Some of you were along in my very long PhD journey because I worked at the CIA for 10 years on the chef-driven conferences, was at the first Menus of Change, et cetera. So it always feels like a huge honor when I get to come back and just show up and not have to worry about any logistics. So thank you to the great team here. I'm here to tell you a little bit about There we go. About what we're doing at JBF. You probably know the awards, but there are still too many people in the industry who only know the awards, which are a great thing. Tune into the live webcast next week when they're happening in Chicago. We do a lot of other things as well, which is what I oversee. And the key thing that we do and why I'm here, because it's about how to empower chefs, how to use their voice. And it's more important than ever to make change, obviously, and to use any platform, big or small, that you have to be doing that. We train chefs for at the federal level because we work in all 50 states, so that's the easiest way to do it. But all of the tools and resources, what works at the federal level works at the state and at the local level as well. So we always encourage chefs to be like, you don't have to be meeting necessarily with senators. You can be meeting with your mayor, with your city council members. The tool, the strategies, the tactics are really the same. And we launched earlier this year our new impact framework, where we're really grounding everything in research. That's really key, especially for the sector that JBF works the most with, which is the independent restaurant industry. A lot of data that is available out there covers high volume food service and not the realities of the independent restaurant industry. From that, we look at what challenges and opportunities are surfaced by data and research, and we develop training programs to support chefs in their journey. Chefs and operators, we work a lot with owners, also and people on the management side of things. And then the advocacy work, obviously, which is what I'll focus on today. I just want to share a couple of the resources that we have on the research side of things so that if you're interested, you can consult them. There's links at the end of my presentation for everything. We work with George Washington University. We've been working with the University of Michigan Executive MBA program. They've done case studies with us for the last 2 years. We do the Independent Restaurant Industry Report. That's a partnership we have with Deloitte, where we do surveys and focus groups also to produce the definitive report and data on the independent restaurant industry. And my goal with that report is when I am at a conference like Menus of Change and people are talking about restaurants, they also show some of our data on the slides, and not necessarily only the slides that might be coming from other organizations around that. So that's on the website. Rip it apart, take it all, copy paste in your slides, etc. And the reason why we're doing all of these things is all of this research and all of that. Our mission is to lead the restaurant industry and the food system at large towards a new standard of excellence. But it's not just about telling chefs, you need to do better. It's really about supporting them in the journey and taking things off their plates to be additive there and to make it a little bit easier. It's harder than ever to be operating restaurants. And so how do we not just pile on with more asks? Here is what's more of your responsibility, but really rather supporting folks in that journey. And the next few slides are what I start every boot camp with, because it's also very isolating when you're running a small restaurant or even a few small restaurants. You're so deep down in the day-to-day and in the grind, it's so easy to forget the larger community you belong to, which is why you have such impact. So these numbers here, the fact that our industry is a 1.5 trillion industry, almost 16 million jobs, right? Like those are very significant numbers, and that's why your voice matters so much as a chef. The fact that 163 million people dine out every week, right? Like you're not just you cooking, you're not just serving the 30 people or 200 people who might be in your dining room at a given time. You are this aggregate there when you operate restaurants. And then these are some data points from specifically single location full service restaurants as part of the research we did with George Washington University. So independent restaurants alone represent 3% of the US workforce. And in a lot of the places where we go and do roundtables that I'll mention later, the hospitality industry is typically 10 or 11% of the employment in any given state. In places like Georgia, Wisconsin, Colorado, that's really what it is. So anything that impacts our industry impacts a whole lot of people, which is why you have a right as chefs to be asking for change and to be asking for things that serve you better because of all of this massive impact. And there's often someone at Menus of Change who presents this data, so I'm hopefully early enough in the program to be the first one to show it to you. This is the 2023 numbers, which are still, the 2024 ones should be coming out this week or next, on the share of total food spending and the share of spend away from home. About 15 years ago, people started spending more money on food they were not preparing. That's the food that is in restaurants, of course, but also in grocery stores, et cetera. And what I always love about this, so 2023 is the peak, where the highest spending on food away from home. I love that it obviously dipped down, way down in 2020. People started cooking at home a lot more and went right back to having you all cook for them. So I think that's not innocent, that's why the numbers are so high in 2023, which again means more power. And also because when you are eating something that you haven't prepared, you really need to have a high trust in the people who are making that food for you. There's a reason why emperors and kings had tasters, right? You can very easily be poisoned through food. That's a very easy way to get rid of someone. So you don't have to get rid of them, but also get like very seriously ill and all these kind of things. So that's why hospitality and food service are the most trusted industries. There's a reason around that. It also means really that you have to know so much more now. That's why a conference like Menus of Change started, right? You have to know so much more to be operating a restaurant, to be cooking. You need to understand so much about health and sanitation and sustainability and nutrition and all these kind of things, which makes it very challenging, and also why you need to have kind of easy resources and that allow you to focus on what you're doing and use that voice and focus on that part of work. And all of that is really why diners, lawmakers, and media really appreciate hearing from chefs and operators, because you're passionate people, you care about people, that's typically why you got into this business. So it makes you really unique advocates from that perspective. Our government affairs person in DC always says that chefs, farmers, and mothers are the most effective advocates. And chefs, lawmakers would way rather have a chef in their office than a lobbyist, right? And they would much rather go to your restaurant and have a conversation than have you in their office also. So that's why we train chefs on really using that power. Also because chefs are such unique liaisons in their community. The fact that when you're a chef, you're not just that one person, you are a community leader, you're an employer, you're touching your staff, you're touching your suppliers, you're talking to diners every night, you have media coming in, lawmakers coming in at all levels, et cetera, et cetera. You really are able to, in a very gentle way, affect and impact so many people's opinions. And that's more important than ever. That one-on-one touch, that individualization of issues, the fact that a lot of lawmakers will care about something because they can put a face to it. There's a reason why at the State of the Union, there's always these people, or all the political speeches, there's always John from down the street was telling me this, and Mary was telling me that. There's a reason why these stories are important, the personalization, the humanization of the big problems and issues that then go into legislation and funding, et cetera. So that's why lawmakers really love hearing from chefs. And what we do is, as part of our boot camp, applications for the next one open on Thursday, by the way, and we have a couple of alums in this room. We bring chefs together on a farm for 3 days. And the reason why we do it that way, not in a conference room or anything like that, is because it's full immersion. And part of that is demonstrating that every decision you make, everything you do as a chef is part of advocacy work. The food you're choosing to purchase, the people you're choosing to purchase from, the benefits you might be offering your staff, all these kind of things, that really is part of your advocacy. So, here we have chefs in Washington State a couple weeks ago learning about regenerative agriculture practices on the farm where we were. The chefs also all cook together because change does not happen solo. It really happens in collaboration. And you need to make negotiations. And so we do this surprise exercise where they are put together. They have an hour and a half to be preparing a dinner for 50 people. And they have to collaborate, right? And obviously, they are very used to collaborating. But that's part of the advocacy making too, the fact that you need to be able to negotiate with folks on the fly to make things happen. And then they also do a campaign exercise training. They work together in group, developing a messaging around a couple of issues that we give them to focus on. And then they go back and for 6 months, they work on their own campaign. And that can be something that is more at the state level using those tools. These are some of their presentations. We have them do graphics and all those kind of things. So again, this is really about collaboration and that importance, and also the fact that you do not have to know all the facts yourself when you're a chef. Every couple of years, we do a Chef Action Summit. We were in Asheville, North Carolina in early April, had over 300 chefs there who were coming at a really, really hard time. This is when all the tariffs were being announced. It's been a really challenging time for our industry, obviously, and a lot of people were feeling very down about would they be open by the end of the year. That's a real question for a lot of people right now. And so and what power did they have in a time when it felt like nothing would work on the advocacy perspective? So bringing people together, refreshing their skills around that was hugely impactful, both from the actual skills, but also the optimism and the hope that was needed at that particular moment. And we ended the conference on the Tuesday around lunchtime. By Tuesday afternoon, I was getting texts from chefs who were calling their lawmakers from the tarmac on their way home. One testified about a bill in Trenton and got it to not go to a vote, but to stay in committee as a briefing instead. So immediately being able to put these tools to use and feeling like, all right, I can make a difference. Showing up is so important because that is how change can happen. And I'll go quickly through some of the findings of our climate campaign, which we started last year. This is data-driven, as I mentioned, with GW, with a report we did. One of the things that is really important for us around this is to have made climate action an economic argument, because then that becomes a bipartisan argument. We work with chefs in all 50 states, in districts and states that are represented by people who might not always believe in climate change, who might not always want to fund climate change, et cetera. So when a chef walks into a lawmaker's office and says, here is how my restaurant has been impacted because I'm in Texas and I designed my restaurant with tons of open space, of outdoor space, and it's been 100 degrees for over 60 days and no one is coming. I'm in North Carolina and it's April and I'm turning on my AC like I would in August. There goes my 3 to 5% typical profit margin, right? Like those costs can add up so quickly and really eat up the benefits, the profits of the restaurant. So making climate a bipartisan argument has really resonated. We talk about things slightly differently depending on who we're talking about. In some cases, we might say climate. In some cases, we talk about extreme weather events. I was mentioning we were in Asheville. For any of you in North Carolina following that, they're not getting the aids that they need to be able to rebuild. And it means even if restaurants are open in a place like Asheville, where is your staff living? You have no staff if there's no housing for them, right? So there's all of these things that need to happen, and this is where, or your farmer's farm may have been washed out. Where do you get your ingredients? The tourists are not coming back if they're thinking that there's still a lot of disaster around. So making climate an economic argument makes it very powerful to have all of these conversations because chefs are taxpayers, and when your revenue is down, your tax bill is down. You're laying off staff. It means they might move. They're not paying as much taxes, et cetera, either. So we've activated 1,500 chefs over the last year with 82 conversations with lawmakers. And one other stat that I'll mention here too is almost 1 billion in earned media impression. This is a message that's really resonating with the media to tell the stories of chefs. And unfortunately, I'm sure there's some people in this room that I've had that conversation too might be thinking that I talk to way too many people where I give these kind of presentations, and people who work in policy and people who work in climate tell me, I never thought of chefs as being impacted by climate. Never think of restaurants as being impacted by climate. I should bring them to my task force. I should bring them to what I'm like, yes, you should, absolutely. So being able to collect all that information through these roundtables that we're doing around the country with lawmakers, farmers, and chefs, local community organizations, et cetera, really help collect all of that information, because what happens then with that data, when we bring chefs for advocacy, and if any of you have been on the Hills or talked to your representatives at any level, your role is to give your story, and then we come in, or our government affairs people come in, and they will tell the data. We share the policy piece. Your job is just to tell your story, but we get to have the aggregate information that makes all of that much more impactful. Overall, when we did 24 meetings on the Hill in December, that is 24 at least staffers and lawmakers from all over the country who go back and say, oh, I heard that from California, I heard that from Texas, I heard that from New York, et cetera. And that's what makes that impact so important at the federal level when it comes to advocacy. I'm out of time, so I'll You'll get all the slides with the stats. But the current legislative landscape is obviously extremely complicated. It's very easy to think that not much can happen. What we're currently working on is activating our chef network around the reconciliation bill and the programs there. So obviously conservation programs are hugely impacted by that, but so are SNAP, Medicaid, et cetera. So to give talking points for chefs to be able to advocate about what they're most caring about when they're having these conversations with their lawmakers. We cannot give up on policies that protect our future as an industry and as a planet. And when this powerful and enormous community comes together, it's impossible to ignore the voice of chefs and of our industry. That's it. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Anne. And yes, her full presentation and all the presentations are in your conference app as well as on our website. We have one more general session before lunch. You are welcome to take a moment and just stand up if you need to move your legs. I'm going to do this introduction, but don't be shy. If you want to stand up, now's your time. So the next session features 2 presentations and then a very brief panel. This is about supporting and expanding ethical, values-based sourcing of animal proteins. And while menus have changed, thank you to those who are standing. It's good to stretch your legs. While the Menus of Change initiative promotes a plant-forward approach, celebrating plants and cuisines that feature them in a predominant way on menus, the approach, we also recognize it's important to serve quality animal proteins and that these have a place on many of your menus. So we're taking an inclusive view on changing menus for all types of eaters by focusing on this ethical sourcing of animal proteins. So first, we're going to hear from Rachel Santo, Senior Food and Climate Research Associate at the World Resources Institute, who leads the design and delivery of environmental research that pertains to healthy and sustainable diets. Rachel will be sharing new research on the trade-offs of sourcing better meat, including promising mitigation strategies for beef specifically. Then Rachel will pass the floor to our one virtual presenter of the summit, Ramanan Laxminarayan, the founder and president of One Health Trust, who is an expert on antibiotic resistance and who will cover the scientific importance of sourcing better meat. And after Ramanan, we will have a brief panel on the stage led by a moderator, Julia Johnson, head of food business at Compassion and World Farming. Julia will be joined by panelist farmer Mike Charles, owner of La Belle Patrimoine, and sustainable sourcing director at Aramark Hazma Abu-Ragheb. And they will introduce themselves on the stage, and they'll have a brief discussion on the realities of producing and sourcing better meat that is better for people and planet. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome Rachel to the stage.
Thank you, Abby. Meat is often in the crosshairs of sustainability debates. Almost 70% of Americans say they care about animal wellness in the food system, and about 2/3 of Americans are concerned about climate change. On the other hand, as Mary referred to in the previous panel, some of the most iconic and beloved dishes Americans enjoy include burgers and steak, and discussions around eating them less can often generate quite controversial discussions. So this leaves many food service providers with more questions than answers. My name is Rachel Santo, and I lead the research team that supports WRI's sustainable diets and food waste initiatives. Today, I'm going to share some research from our team that explores how food service providers can balance their ethical and sustainability priorities when sourcing animal proteins. This research comes out of our Cool Food Initiative, which works with food service providers to create dining environments that make it easier for people to choose healthy, plant-forward menu items. Many of the food service providers that we work with, who are mostly based in North America and Europe, understand that shifting to more plant-rich menus can reduce their food-related emissions in their supply chains. But a common question we get is, for the meat we do continue to source and serve, how can we source it in ways that are better for climate? And what are those ways? And how can we balance our climate goals with our other values-based commitments? To answer these questions, we dug into the research to understand how different animal production systems stack up in terms of their environmental, animal welfare, public health, and other priorities, and what that means for food providers. To do this, We analyzed data on the animal production systems associated with both conventional and alternative production systems, shown at right here, from 45 studies, or life cycle assessments, conducted in North America and Europe from 2000 to 2022. These studies were based on real farm data as opposed to simulated data, and each study compared a conventional animal production system with an alternative production system, such as organic, grass-fed, pasture-raised, or free-range. We refer to these alternative production systems as alternative in contrast to the conventional production systems in which the vast majority of farm animals in the US are raised in confined facilities, often with hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of other animals, depending on the species. And we compared the environmental performance across 4 different indicators: greenhouse gas emissions, land use, water use, and water pollution. I'm now going to share 3 key takeaways from this research and a follow-up study we're wrapping up now that tries to apply these findings to beef purchasing in particular. So the first key takeaway is that, unfortunately, what is better for animals is not always better for the planet. And as we'll explore in the next few slides, there are often trade-offs in looking and comparing both within species, such as comparing grass-fed beef to feedlot finished beef, and also trade-offs comparing between species, such as between beef and chicken. An unsettling and often surprising finding from this research is that many alternative production systems associated with higher animal welfare and more responsible antibiotic use, such as organic, grass-fed, or free-range, generally have higher climate impacts than conventional systems. I know this might seem counterintuitive because many of these systems are generally considered to be better for animals in the environment. When you think about it, these systems often require more land for the animals, such as for cattle to graze or for chickens to roam more freely. And these animals that are raised in these systems generally live longer, which means that they release more emissions across their lifespan and they require more food across their lifespan. So taking together both the emissions and land use associated with producing animal proteins, we find that alternative meat and dairy production systems had higher climate impacts in total in 94% of the cases. It's important to include land use in these conversations because the more land that's required to produce the same amount of protein means that to meet growing global demand for animal proteins, more land is needed to be dedicated to livestock production, which drives deforestation and the carbon emissions released during that process. It's also important to point out that even some of the lower emitting systems on, for instance, beef and lamb on the far left, are still generally many orders of magnitude greater than the emissions associated with more plant-based proteins, such as beans and pulses. So we know, though, that climate isn't the only issue that many food providers and consumers are concerned about. So we also compared the results for water use and water pollution, finding that in over half of the cases, alternative production systems had higher impacts than the conventional systems. And across all 4 metrics, greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and water pollution, the alternative systems had higher impacts 75% of the time. Then we layer in animal welfare. And it's important to recognize that while it might seem tempting from a climate perspective to shift toward more poultry away from beef because chicken generally releases less emissions than beef, this would have serious animal welfare considerations and impacts because a lot more animals would need to be slaughtered to produce the same amount of meat. And continuing to increase industrial poultry production poses a number of other animal welfare and public health concerns that will be explored in the panel to follow. So what then are the options for reducing emissions in the food system, especially from beef purchasing, which accounts for over 50% of most food service providers' total greenhouse gas emissions in their supply chains? To dig into this question, we dug further into research and interviewed academic experts to understand best practices for reducing beef-related emissions and what food providers could do to source beef from those raised with those practices. And unfortunately, and surprising to us as well, is that there aren't many options yet for those on the purchasing end of the supply chain to verifiably purchase beef raised with fewer emissions. there are a number of existing practices that can reduce emissions, including maintaining and improving yields, especially in lower yielding systems, and optimizing grazing practices, such as having cattle feed less on overgrazed fields and more on undergrazed fields, as well as improving disease management. There are also some new and emerging technologies, such as feed additives, vaccines, wearable technologies, and more to reduce methane emissions. Some of these technologies are still very nascent, and we need more research. For instance, in the feed additive side of the equation, they're only currently effective in feedlot settings, whereas most of the emissions associated with beef production actually happen before the cattle get to the feedlot. And optimizing grazing practices is often generally associated with grass finishing systems or grass-fed beef, but could actually be implemented in earlier stages of even conventional beef production. So there are opportunities here to see some alignment across different systems. Unfortunately, when we compared what options are available for food service providers who want to choose beef raised with some of these practices, there aren't yet, most of the existing third-party certification criteria doesn't yet include most of these practices in it. So there aren't yet options to verifiably purchase beef raised with lower emissions. And it's also worth pointing out that, as on the previous slide where you saw the lowest end of the beef-related emissions were generally much higher still than plant-based emissions, is that even with these lower emissions options, they're still going to be only reducing a fraction of that total footprint for beef. And so it will still be orders of magnitude higher than some of the plant-based protein options. So what does this mean for the food industry? Well, there are opportunities to demand increased transparency from food suppliers and certification programs so that we can better match some of the existing best practices with options to purchase for suppliers, for customers, including food service providers who are purchasing these foods. And this also leads us to our final takeaway, which is that there are ways that you can mitigate some of the trade-offs and even avoid some of the trade-offs by continuing to shift toward more plants. And in fact, unquestionably, the best path forward is to reduce meat, regardless of the production system used. That said, if you are choosing to prioritize meat that comes from systems with higher animal welfare and other sustainability and public health benefits, that you'll have to shift from a less meat strategy to an even less meat strategy. What does this look like in practice? Well, say you are an average food service company who sources an average mix of products, as shown in the leftmost bar here. These are the emissions from that mix of products at a baseline year. And say you commit to reducing your food-related emissions by 25% by 2030. I know it says 25% by 2025 on here. That would be amazing if you were that ambitious, but you have 5 more years to go. And how could you achieve a pathway to get to 25% fewer emissions by 2030? Well, you could start with a pure, less meat approach, and, for instance, could reduce your beef purchases by 50% and other animal source purchases by 15 to 20%, and scale up your plant-based food purchases, especially plant-based proteins. That could get you to a 25% emissions reduction over a course of years as you implement those practices. But say you also want to source higher welfare poultry and eggs, such as free-range poultry and eggs. That would increase your emissions slightly, but those could be offset if you were to reduce beef purchases by 53% less instead of 50% less. And this is kind of illustrated as an even less meat scenario here. If you also wanted to source grass-fed beef in place of some of the conventional beef, the reductions would need to be even more ambitious. But this shows you that even though some of these alternative systems have higher environmental impacts, you can meet multiple goals at one time by shifting from a less meat strategy to an even less meat strategy. So what does all this mean in practice? Well, we hoped that this research would be able to navigate a clearer path forward in this complicated landscape. Ideally, even a do this, not that approach. But as with most major global problems, there is no silver bullet solution. There's no one single way to produce animal proteins that's better across all environmental, economic, and ethical considerations. At the same time, and these challenges can lead many industry leaders and business makers and policymakers struggling to weigh the different trade-offs these different purchases. But there is a path forward, and that is to continue to shift toward more plant-rich menu items, and in doing so, continuing to emphasize the less and better meat approach. We also encourage food providers to continue to demand increased transparency in supply chains from your suppliers as well as from certification providers so that we can better match best practices in reducing emissions with the options available to purchase. And lastly, we encourage you to continue supporting independent research because that is needed to continue navigating these complicated landscapes. At WRI, we believe our role isn't to oversimplify complexity, but to help navigate it, translating research into real-world choices that can help drive meaningful change in this complicated landscape. So if you are looking to source and balance some of these different considerations from a climate, animal welfare, public health, or others values-based commitments in your sourcing of animal proteins or in shifting diets more broadly, we encourage you to reach out. We'd love to work with you to analyze your data, curate case studies, develop more targeted research and tools. You can visit our website to learn more and to contact us at coolfood.org. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your patience. We are going to pull up our next presenter, Ramanan, who will be a virtual presenter. So this is just a stage transition, and here he is. Welcome, Ramanan. Thanks for being here virtually.
Pleasure to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, we
perfect.
can. Go ahead.
All right, terrific. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to speak to all of you. As I think the introduction was about, the fact that chefs are very trusted people. We all eat your food, and so that's the ultimate sort of mark of trust that we sort of put ourselves at your at your mercy with respect to the quality and the health of the food that you serve. So I think you all play a very, very important role in what I'm about to speak about right now. So I work on this area of antibiotic resistance. Now, some of you may have heard about it, just in the general media and so forth. So I'm very quickly going to take you through just some information to explain why this is important, and then try to sort of point in some directions for where we can actually be doing better. So that's our blue sky profile, and so just to say that we haven't had antibiotics for very long. We've had them for just about 85 years. They were first used to treat patients, in 1941, saved a lot of lives during the Second World War. And just to, give you a sense for what I'm asking you to do here, this is a newborn in the era just after antibiotics were introduced. So here's a child. She's about to die of necrotizing fasciitis, a bacterial infection that's about to eat her face. And you can see that by day 3, she gets antibiotics. And then by day 6, she's on the road to recovery. Now, this is the amazing power of antibiotics. Drugs that are able to go through our system and be able to treat infections at the site without harming living human cells. And this is not to be taken for granted. It's something which is an absolute amazing thing to have. But we're fast losing this power of antibiotics. And this has been tied to many things, but it's particularly tied to the use of antibiotics in food animals. In Canada, for instance, when they withdrew an antibiotic for use in eggs, the level of resistance of salmonella, and you're all familiar with salmonella because it's a foodborne disease that you never want to see in your restaurant, the drug-resistant salmonella just dropped. And it started coming back only when ceftiofur use was reinstated. So this is just one figure of thousands of studies showing that antibiotic use in food animals is closely tied both to drug resistance or untreatable infections in both animals as well as in humans. And resistance itself has increased in animals. If you care just about animal welfare, it's now much harder to treat animals with infections because of the antibiotics that have been fed and the creation of drug-resistant pathogens, which means untreatable pathogens. So in chickens and pigs, it's gone up nearly threefold between 2000 and 2018. Now, this is a New York Times cover from 1950. Why am I showing you this? Um, because of this. This was the first time a drug, aureomycin, was found to spur growth in chicken by 50%. This is the growth of the broiler. This is sort of the birth of the broiler industry with respect to being able to grow far more birds, on limited spaces because they were able to increase their growth much faster. And the man at the left, Thomas Jukes, was the one who did the experiment to figure this out. And since then, we have a huge amount of antibiotics being used in animals. Now, when people look back at the previous century, many centuries from now, one of the things that would stand out is the fact that the demand for animal protein in the world has just shot up over the previous century. For instance, people in China would eat meat maybe one day a week, or sorry, maybe even a couple of days a year. And today, everyone eats it at every meal. And this is true in many countries around the world. So current protein demand for the world is extraordinary. The global antibiotic consumption was 131,000 tons in 2013, and it's projected to reach 200,000 tons by 2030. And 2/3 of that tonnage is used just in agriculture, which means food animals, and aquaculture, which is basically, mostly fish. And the breakdown, as you can see, there's only a some amount that's used for humans that we get antibiotics for treatment, like for that girl you saw. The rest of it is all used for cattle, chicken, pigs, or fish. And one thing we have to remember is that the bacteria are not in a different place than us. We ourselves are mostly composed of bacteria. In fact, most of our body weight, most of our cells are actually bacterial cells. And we essentially live in a sea of bacteria. So when resistance emerges and spreads, we are not outside of the system. We're like, fish in the ocean. So those bacteria are affecting us all the time, and they can cause significant damage to us. In fact, every year, about between 1.27 and 5 million people die because of bacterial pathogens that are resistant, which means they cannot be treated with antibiotics available to treat them. So 1.27 is sort of the bare minimum. That's the low bound of the estimate. And about 5 million is the higher end of the estimate. But these are very large numbers, very large numbers. Just for comparison, more people die because of drug-resistant infections than do of HIV, malaria, TB, all put together. And this is almost as much as the number of people who die of stroke or potentially even of ischemic heart disease around the world. Now, urinary tract infections. Now, women are more likely to get UTIs prior to the age of 65, but after that, men and women are at equal risk. And UTIs never used to kill people before, but today UTIs do kill. This is a cover story. This is a long form story from the New York Times. And the longer version of the story, which is worth a read, is showing that a lot of these urinary tract infections that are untreatable in women are caused by consumption of meat that that's contaminated with bacteria, but more importantly, the bacteria are untreatable with antibiotics. And in other parts of the world, they essentially kill a lot of people, starting to do that quite a bit in the US as well. There's about 35,000 people who die in the US every year because of these infections. Now, things started to change in 2015. This was under President Obama. There was a preference for meat and poultry produced according to responsible antibiotic use policies, which meant that in federal cafeterias and so forth, if someone produced meat which was free of antibiotics, they would get a preference, all else being equal. And similarly, federal cafeterias were required to offer an antibiotic-free meat option as well. And the minute this option became available, people started to realize that, wait a minute, there's meat that is with antibiotics and meat without antibiotics, and I didn't realize there was a difference, and now I see a difference, which means that the consumer preferences have changed tremendously. I spent a lot of time on the Hill prior to 2015 trying to convince Senate staff to do something about removing antibiotics from animals. And in fact, the late Senator Ted Kennedy was a big promoter of trying to do this through a bill he tried to get passed for many years, but never got the attention because people didn't want to sort of, the farm lobby was seen as too powerful. But once consumer preferences started changing by this knowledge, then things change quite a bit. And in fact, Purdue Chicken, for instance, went directly from using antibiotics to saying no antibiotics ever. So today there is no excuse. We can have antibiotic-free meat. It's freely available. It isn't much more expensive than regular meat. And I don't want to confuse antibiotic-free meat with organic. Those are two different standards. You can have, non-organic standards, but still have no antibiotics ever. Obviously the pricing is different. Organic requires organic feed, and that can be a lot more expensive. And that's important for a different set of reasons. But this is a simpler thing to do, which is to ask for meat which has been raised without antibiotics. And today it is very possible to raise meat without antibiotics because animal health is better because of vaccines, better biosecurity, better nutrition for animals, better herd health, better availability of veterinarians. This isn't like the situation, 70 years ago, I guess 75 years ago, with Thomas Jukes, when you had the weight gain. Today, you don't get that because the antibiotics they don't have to do that much work. Now, there have been scorecards on antibiotic policies and practices, and obviously some score an F and some score an A, and hopefully all your restaurants are on the A with respect to antibiotic policies and practices. But in general, I think a lot of businesses are coming on board. This is from Trader Joe's. This is from other sort of restaurants showing that they basically are using chicken or meat that was raised without the use of antibiotics. And I think this is a movement that's only going forward in one direction, but we need to go forward a lot faster. If you look at the sales and distribution of medically important drugs approved for use in food producing animals, 2014 onwards, which is when we first started, with the with the previous administration under President Obama, it did drop, but then the consumption has started to slightly go back up again, which means that we need to push this down further. And the reason we need to push this down is even today, the share of antibiotics that are used in livestock production is still 65%. It's a lot better than where it was in 2009, certainly a lot better than where it was by 2013, 2014, when it was 75%, but we can be doing a lot better than this. Antibiotics should really be used for human medicine or to treat sick animals, should not be used for weight gain, which is what a lot of this goes towards. And this is just my last sort of data slide, and I hope you'll bear with me. These points is the percentage in weight gain from pigs that were fed antibiotics. And this is in the 50s and the 60s. Here, you could get an 8 or 10% improvement in average daily growth of pigs fed antibiotics, simply because, like I said, they didn't have the hygiene, the nutrition, all of which, the antibiotics were making up for. Antibiotics basically, serve the role of fattening up the pigs or the chicken, because they're basically serving as a proxy for these other things which relate to nutrition. In fact, antibiotics are used in acute malnourished children for exactly the same purpose. But you don't need to feed antibiotics to children who are well. In the same way, we don't need to feed antibiotics to pigs that are in good condition and are in healthy condition. So that average daily weight gain has actually gone down significantly over time. So today, there is no real benefit to a good farmer who is doing all the right things. There's no additional benefit from using antibiotics. So it's really a win-win situation where you get to feed your customers much healthier meat, lower risk of infections, and preserve the power of antibiotics. And the cost is no greater than if they did not use the antibiotics. Antibiotics still get used more out of just inertia and habit rather than really because they are doing very much for the farmer anymore. So I just want to stop here. This is our website, and we have a lot of data on this, on what I just spoke about, and I'm happy to obviously speak to any of you. You can find my name, you can Google it and send me an email. But thanks again to the Culinary Institute for the opportunity to speak about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramanan, for sharing. And all of the slides and presentations, again, are on our conference app, resources. And yes, please reach out. And thanks again for being here. So I'm going to bring to the stage our panel to contextualize this. We are going to take 5 more minutes. You'll get 5 more minutes at lunch. You'll still have an hour. So we'll have 20 minutes here, and then I'll send you off into lunch. So welcome Julia, Mike, and Hamza to have a conversation.
Thank you, Abby. And thank you, everyone, for joining this important panel to discuss values-based sourcing for animal proteins. As the food system navigates rising climate challenges, evolving consumer expectations, and a deeper awareness for animal welfare and public health, this conversation isn't solely just about sourcing. It's also about leadership, resilience, and really responsibility. My name is Julia Johnson, and I am the head of corporate and public policy at an international animal welfare organization called Compassion in World Farming. We work with companies, institutions, and producers to really raise the baseline for animal welfare, specifically for pigs, laying hens, and meat chickens. We also have a North Star towards a more regenerative and plant-forward food system as well that's better for people, animals, and the planet. I'm joined by two colleagues, Mike and Hamza, that are not only close colleagues but friends as well, and we're excited to dive a little bit deeper into what this means for farm animals. So would love for you both to introduce yourselves, not only who you are and what your company does, but why is this values-based sourcing for animal proteins important?
Well, just thank you, Julia, and Culinary Institute of America for having us. And so my name is Mike Charles. I'm a sixth-generation poultry farmer from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I'm the founder of La Belle Patrimony. And what La Belle Patrimony is really I represent a whole community of farmers back in Pennsylvania, and we grow heritage-style chicken. And the chicken is a really unique, special breed that comes from the La Belle Rouge program in France. So we've brought that breed here, to Pennsylvania, and we are making it available to those in the States.
Thank you for having me. My name is Hamza Abu-Ragheb. I'm the Director of Sustainable Sourcing at Airmark. Airmark is a hospitality and food service company, so we cook and serve food in the places where you eat, work, play. My role on sustainable sourcing is under the umbrella of responsible sourcing. We have a sustainability strategy called Be Well, Do Well, and through that, my role is to try to source more sustainably, both from an environmental and social perspective. My career has always been in sustainability in one way or another, but I kind of stumbled on sustainability, on sustainable sourcing, and kind of to all of the points being said from this morning, you know, affecting sourcing and the food system is really important. So I'm hopefully having an impact that way.
Yeah, thank you both. And so thinking about where we can start with this conversation, what does expanding ethical values-based sourcing for animal proteins mean for each of you?
I mean, for me, at the farm, you know, I'm going to start it all at the farm level. Our La Belle Patrimony heritage chickens are certified by the Global Animal Partnership. So we have, you know, animal welfare has always been in our DNA. It's just most farmers really truly do care about the birds, and they want to do a good job. But because of kind of the traditional system here in the States, some of the farmers have been forced to compromise. So I think what we do is, by working with a Better Chicken Commitment and Global Animal Partnership, we can actually certify these farms and annually audit them, and things just to, on the farm level, really preserve animal welfare and prove to people that this actually can be sustainable as well.
For us, ethical-based, you know, sourcing of animal products is kind of trying to take everything we've been talking about since this morning into consideration. So we have to balance the animal welfare part with the other social and environmental pieces, including climate, etc. So trying to take a holistic view and balancing all these, you know, sometimes, like Rachel said, conflicting elements into consideration is the hope, is the plan.
Yeah. Mike, you touched a little bit about the current marketplace, but for both of you, what's currently working in the current marketplace, and what are some of the challenges that you both are facing when it comes to shifting towards a more humane and sustainable supply chain?
Well, so we started La Belle Patrimony about 5 years ago. We started with just one flock, and now I represent over 60 different farmers now, and we're in over 400 retail outlets and restaurants, and continuing to grow it. Our year over year is incredible. So there's a demand. I want to share that this is a growing movement, that people truly do care where their food is coming from, and that it was treated humanely, and that it's part of a sustainable program. And we work with a lot of small family farms to try to get their, work with them and figure out a way that this can be done and be sustainable. So the question?
What's working and what's the challenge?
So that's what's working. What's working is our approach. We have a different model. So what I did want to share is that in traditional, a lot of our farmers that we know, in traditional contracts, they end up competing against their neighbors. They're just paid on financial performance. Like if their flock does better than their neighbors, they get a bonus, and that's not okay with us. Like we want a community to support each other and encourage each other, and we want this to be a really positive thing for the whole community. So one hurdle I see though is once a farmer understands that, then they're ready to jump on board and do this. But then we, as a company, need to get the highest value for our chicken. So we face what's called whole bird utilization. Just getting customers and the people to understand that we have a really special product. These farmers are, they left the traditional way. They're part of our modern growing system where we don't have them compete. We just make sure that the farmer's made whole. We take the financial responsibility off the farmer. So because of that, the chicken, out of the respect for the bird and for the farmers, we need to get a higher value for that product. So one thing we face is how do we utilize the whole bird and get a higher value?
I agree with Mike that from a what's working perspective, there's obviously momentum, good momentum towards this kind of these efforts. So I mean, this conference is one indicator of that, right? Enough people coming together to talk about such things, and the demand. We're seeing the demand both at the guest, the quote unquote consumer level, but also at the client and customer level. So there is momentum. The sustainability practitioner part of me wonders if it's fast enough or quick enough, but I think that's why we're all here talking about it. From a challenge perspective, it's kind of really back to what Rachel was saying about the balancing of the climate versus the welfare versus the social versus the environmental. Sometimes they click perfectly and it's much easier, but sometimes they're not. And so our company and many companies like ours are trying to balance those kind of conflicting elements, including also the economics, the guest or consumer preferences, and just kind of the system overall that we've been talking about that's kind of maybe was built in a specific way, and we need to kind of challenge it a bit to move sustainability along.
Yeah. I think that's true, and it's important to acknowledge those challenges because we have a big hurdle ahead of us. But this panel is also about momentum and what are the opportunities that we can to really create change, whether it's systemic, cultural, or economic as well. So I guess, Hamza, for you to start, how do we scale what's working and institutionalize those values-based sourcing? So it's not just a niche effort, but it becomes the norm across the food industry.
Yeah, so I think one is a bit of reframing. So one example is that we have a sustainable sourcing policy, which is our public statement around all the things that we're trying to do from a sourcing perspective. And in the past, we used to have an animal welfare section and an antibiotic section, and different pieces. And especially with the climate efforts that are ongoing and realizing how the animal proteins are a big piece of our carbon footprint, we kind of reframed it and evolved it so that it everything kind of falls under a more responsible animal proteins, sourcing approach. It's not perfect, everything needs work, but, kind of reframing a bit and kind of to really be intentional about the balancing of all these elements. Another thing is kind of bringing people along. So, externally we have a lot of stakeholders and people we need to convince. So that, again, there's the customer and client that we're actually, in their space serving food, but then there's also the guest, the person that actually eats the food. And we have to bring all of those stakeholders along. Internally, it's also the same because rarely is there one clear decision maker. There's the sourcing team and the sustainability team and the chefs and the nutritionists, etc. And so we have to all collaborate together to move this along. So I think collaboration and kind of bringing both internal and external stakeholders on the journey is really important.
Do you have anything to add, Mike?
Well, I would just say on bringing things to scale, I'm going back to the farm, and what we see, and we have a waiting list of farmers who want to grow these birds, as you can see. I mean, these are just pictures of one of our farms, and you can see the birds are very unique and different, and this, for the farmers, this is refreshing, especially farmers who had poultry experience in the past. They see birds like this, and it's almost like, really? Like this is truly successful and sustainable? And I'm like, yeah, this works. So scaling on the farm side, we've got a waiting list of farmers who want to jump on board and grow these birds.
Yeah, I think that's really telling that the farmers, there's quite literally a waiting list to grow this type. And it's not just about the economic compensation, but the bird health as well. And in some of the photos for you all to see, there was a photo earlier of a bird perching. And to be able to see birds stand up and walk, let alone perch, is really not as common. And that's why this type of work is so important when we're thinking about animal welfare and how it's linked to chicken genetics. So for each of your experiences, what are some examples of supply chain innovation, cross-sector partnerships? Hamza, you mentioned education internally and externally, or even procurement policies that are meaningful to shift the supply chain. Maybe some specific examples.
Yeah, again, going back to the farm. So at the farm, our birds obviously have pasture, but they are free will. They can move inside and outside, which is kind of a different concept. But we noticed that the chickens, on a really hot summer day, they want to go inside, and on a beautiful day, they want to be outside. So first of all, we had to choose the right breed, birds that want to be outside. That's so many of the modern breeds just really are not active. So we have a really robust, healthy bird. So what we do then is enhance the environment, but just naturally. We plant trees, we do soil tests. We've even been approved to be regeneratively raised on our label from USDA, just because of some of the stuff we're doing in the pastures. So it's not maybe new technology, but it's also definitely a new strategy that wasn't happening in commercial poultry before. But it's working. The birds love being outside. And farmers are just refreshed, like, wow, this is awesome. I didn't know chickens wanted to go outside. It's like, yeah. And I think at the processing, at the packing level, we do something called air chill, which is I think very important. And not many people know really what air chill is. But to know what air chill is, you need to know what water chilled is. And really quick, what most poultry in the United States is water chilled, which means it's submerged in water that's filled with chemicals, and it can soak up. It's there for 1 to 2 hours, can soak up almost 10% water, and then those birds are marketed, and that's why sometimes you have that liquid in the bottom of a poultry bag or tray. But for us, we just do air chill, no submerging in chemical water, just cool the bird down with air. And I think that again, we don't have that 10% water, but I think it's healthier and truly a better way.
For us, I think one really impactful kind of exercise is, cross-industry collaboration, especially with kind of partners, NGO partners like Compassion and others. So, as big as Airmark is, and some of the other food service companies in the audience are, on our own we can't do much. Plus there's a lot of science and things that we need to learn and figure out. And so just coming together and working together has proven very useful. So, one specific example, Compassion in World Farming has a Better Chicken working group. So we're part of that. But we're part of 3 to 4 working groups at any moment in time, dealing with, broader, better animal sourcing. So that's been really helpful, and I think it's kind of the only way for the whole industry to shift. Each company makes its own decisions, of course, but we learn from each other, and we can kind of send the market, the same message or the same, messaging. So that's been really helpful. I think also just being transparent with the public and with external stakeholders about both what our accomplishments are and our intent is, through like a policy of sorts, but also where the challenges are. So if we don't meet a specific goal or we're struggling with a specific pathway, we'll say that publicly, and sometimes that will kind of open up good, useful conversations that help us and others move along.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about what needs to happen over the next 10 years, what are some changes that you both would want to see, and who needs to lead to get us there?
Well, as far as who needs to lead, I think it is a collaborative effort. I think anybody that sells protein or buys protein, I think really needs to just, if we band together and kind of raise the level of the bar, raise the level of excellence that we demand, I think that from a farm side and production side, people will join forces and do this. I do think it is a movement, and I think that if we all kind of collaborate, we can revolutionize the chicken business anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It takes all of us, both as individuals, but also as companies and organizations, kind of reflecting on everything that's been said from this morning. Like the whole system obviously needs to shift, but the whole system is us, and so we all have a role to play. And companies for sure have a big role to play, both educating kind of guests and consumers, but also taking the lead and making decisions that are good for the world.
Mm-hmm. We've covered practical obstacles and realities with also bold aspirations. So to close, what is one key takeaway that you have for the audience that they can leave with today?
Kind of just continuing with the theme, and I feel like I'm just repeating everything everybody said, is that we all have a role, right? Everybody needs to do a little bit. If you're a company like ours, I would, again, recommend being transparent and open to collaboration and sharing of ideas and challenges with others in your industry. And again, this conference really helps with that, so hopefully we're on the right track.
And I would say when you're purchasing your protein, look at claims because those claims are there for a reason. In our case, those claims are supporting small family farms and really ensuring that those higher level animal welfare standards are being met. I mean, they do mean something. So I would just encourage you to do that when you're purchasing protein because it does go a long way.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for sharing your stories and your hope and vision for the food system, and we look forward to continuing the conversation at lunch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, indeed, next up is lunch. So I just want to remind you that you will find, so we have, of course, a plant-forward approach to lunch, which means that the lunch will emphasize plants but does not exclusively feature only plants. Today's lunch is our innovative bento box format, which is set up for you to very easily and quickly grab and go and take the box and enjoy anywhere outside around campus. You're welcome to come back in here. You can ask directions for Farquharson Hall, which is in Roth Hall, where the students get to also dine. And if you have pre-selected an alternate lunch for gluten-free, allergens, vegan, please check in with the team. Oh, sorry, there's a sign that you will see for alternate box lunch. Chef faculty Martin Matzik submitted a recipe for the lunch, so the CIA recipe spotlight is featured in the box. It's the risotto recipe, and we hope you enjoy. For those collaborative members, there is a meetup outside of Post Road, an optional chance for the collaborative members to connect. And at 1:35, it'll be there at 1:30, dessert and coffee downstairs in the lower level Marriott Pavilion. And in the spirit of a sustainable event, you'll see that many of our things are compostable. Just please pay attention to all the signage around what goes where. There will be a table outside in Palmer Plaza, which is where the bento box pickup is, for you to return your bento box, for us to properly dispose of it. We will return here for our next session at 1:50. So thank you so much, and please enjoy the lunch, and we will return here soon.
Gardein plant-based products offer a delicious alternative for any meal of the day. Gardein is 100% plant-based and certified vegan product, and it can replace traditional chicken in almost any application. Gardein plant-based chicken strips and breasts are really easy to prepare and make a convenient option for restaurants looking to expand vegetarian and vegan menu offerings. Whether whole, sliced, diced, or shredded, Gardein chicken products can be served in the same traditional way chicken would be used. The product holds up very well in any cooking method, including frying, baking, sautéing, or poaching. I'm going to show you how to use Gardein chicken strips and breasts and how they can be served in place of chicken in a number of applications, including salads, noodle bowls, wraps, tostadas, or even sandwiches. Here, I have a Gardein chicken and quinoa grain bowl, which is a hearty and delicious dish. It's perfect for grab and go, college campus dining, or a fast casual operation. I've defrosted and seasoned the Gardein chicken breasts, then simply grilled them on a grill pan. You can see that they hold up well to high heat and have beautiful grill marks, just like traditional grilled chicken. To put the bowl together, I'm going to make mounds of mixed greens, quinoa, garbanzo beans, tomatoes, olives, cucumbers, red onion, carrot, and beets. Then I'm going to top the salad with sliced grilled Gardein chicken breasts. The Gardein chicken is delicious served hot or chilled. Top everything in the bowl with a lemon vinaigrette for a beautiful Mediterranean-inspired bowl. Here's another dish that's great for college dining, fast casual, or grab and go. I made this sesame Gardein chicken noodle bowl by seasoning Gardein chicken strips in a sesame soy marinade and then sautéing the strips until they're golden brown. Next, toss some chilled soba noodles in a soy sesame dressing. Now we'll put together the bowl. Top the noodles with cucumbers, red peppers, shredded carrot, bean sprouts, green onions, and sesame seeds. In a college dining hall, sautéed Gardein chicken can be served as part of a noodle bar where students choose their noodles, sauce, vegetables, and protein. Top the bowl with the sesame Gardein chicken and you have a delicious and hearty vegan entree. The next item I want to show you is this Moroccan spiced Gardein chicken wrap. I've seasoned Gardein chicken strips with dukkha, which is a Middle Eastern spice blend, and then sautéed the Gardein chicken. In my wrap, I'm going to add some preserved lemon tahini sauce, some greens, cherry tomatoes, roasted carrots, parsley, mint, my sautéed Moroccan spiced Gardein chicken, and another drizzle of the preserved lemon tahini sauce. Go ahead and wrap that up nice and tight so that it's a convenient handheld grab-and-go item. Next up, I'm going to show you this Gardein chicken mole tostada, which is a delicious and fun customizable meal. The hero of this dish is the Gardein chicken that I've simmered in a Mexican-style mole. To put together our tostada, I'll top my crispy tortilla with some hot refried beans and some of our rich and savory Gardein chicken mole. Top that with some shredded cabbage, sliced avocado, pickled red onions, vegan crema, salsa, and some cilantro. And you have a delicious and satisfying plant-based entree. Finally, I'm going to show you how to make this vegetarian version of a chicken katsu sandwich, also known as katsu sando. Katsu sandos can be found everywhere in Japan, and the sandwich is now trending in the US. First, I've fried this Gardein chicken fillet in oil. Gardein chicken products fry up really well. It keeps a satisfying bite, and it gets perfectly crispy on the outside. Spread some fluffy Japanese milk bread with mayo, and top that with the crispy Gardein chicken katsu, some tonkatsu sauce, and then some shredded cabbage. The crispy Gardein chicken, pillowy soft bread, and the savory tonkatsu sauce will make this Gardein chicken katsu sando a hit. Gardein chicken products are an easy swap for animal proteins and can be prepared just like traditional meat. Perfect for those who follow a plant-based diet, Gardein chicken is a versatile staple that can elevate everyday dishes into something extraordinary.
The dish which we are making today is like vegetable millet halim. Generally the halim is to make with the non-vegetarian version, but we transform into making into the vegetable halim with the vegetable version. We are replacing the polished grains with the millets. That's how it's becoming more healthy towards. So that we need to have a lot of Indian spices are going in making a vegetable millet halim. Generally the vegetable millet halim is tend to make with the non-vegetarian version, but we are making with the vegetarian version. We need to brown the onion, cook very time. The preparation of authentic halim will take generally 16 to 18 hours. We added some whole garam masala. So right now we will be adding some little bit of salt. This is actually the very fast way to make the onion caramelize very fast. Then after I will be adding a little bit of turmeric. It's a ginger garlic paste. You have to properly saute it, otherwise it will give a very raw smell. Now I will be adding this oats, paste of oats. We soaked it the oats and we made it into a paste, fine paste out of it. Now I will be adding this thing into this mixture. Now we will be slowly cooking the oats paste mixture along with the sauté onion, ginger garlic paste and turmeric mixture to it. Now I will be adding the broken wheat mixture, which has been again boiled and pasted. Now I will be adding the green chili paste. Water. Again, it's time to add some little bit of turmeric to it to add more color to the dish. This is the coriander powder. Roasted cumin powder. So we need to cook along all with the spices. Now we will be adding a lot of fried onion into it. So this is the key ingredient for making the halim. Now we will be adding the paste of the vegetables. It is a combination of carrot, beans, cabbage and potato. Now we are in the finishing stage of the halim. So lots of coriander should be adding up. Chopped mint, lemon juice for taste kind of. We will be adding up with some garam masala powder, mixed spice. Now we will be adding a lot of ghee into it, clarified butter. Now we are done with our halim.